Hey everybody, Brian the Pirate here. So this video is just to give you my, I suppose, impressions of the changes and the direction that the Diablo 4 team are taking the game. There's a couple of good things. There's definitely some good points, and I think overall the direction that they're now going in is very much the right direction. It feels like a course correction, and I want to see them go further in this direction of adding more depth to the game. I think it's become apparent to the Diablo 4 devs that for a live service, specifically a live service action RPG, so similar games would be like Last Epoch and Path of Exile, for example, there has to be more depth. And based on like the spiel that Joe Shelley gave at the beginning of the last campfire chat, it appears that they've realized this and going with the super casual, simple, shallow route that they had originally done with Diablo 3, which enabled it to sell really, really well, doesn't really work when you want a game that retains players for long periods of time and makes them want to come back over and over and over again. So let's start with the new crafting system. The crafting system is fantastic. It's an amazing choice in change of direction. They've added a new chase, because previously in, like, say, Diablo 3 and of course up until now Diablo 4, you didn't really have any other chase other than unique items, to be honest. Like, yes, legendaries to a degree, but it was just basically farm drops from wherever the bosses that you need to farm drop them from, and there wasn't really much more to it. Whereas now they've introduced this master crafting, this tempering system. It gives you a lot more creativity. You still have to find your best in slot uniques, for example, but then you can now create more customizable gear. So gear that's specific to you, specific to your build. It helps promote build diversity. And again, it gives you this secondary chase that you can indulge in whilst also just looking for naturally found drops at the same time. This is really, really good. One thing I've noticed in particular, though, is, and to be clear, this is on the PTR. Hopefully these things get fixed when it comes to the live version of the game for Season 4. But there are bugs, and obviously they said this is something that you were likely to come across. One bug that I particularly noticed was I was doing a barrage / rain of arrows rogue build, and the casting barrage twice, like affix that you can put on gear, straight up didn't work. I don't know if it was just me or if it's other people that have tried it as well. Some bugs happened for some people, some bugs didn't for others, but for me, barrage never casted twice, which was kind of funny because I was doing pretty hard content. I did Uber Duriel, for example. I was doing Nightmare 90 plus dungeons, and I was going through the pit. I only went to, I think it was tier 40 in the pit because I didn't want to burn myself out on the PTR. But I was blasting through it without having the double cast, so I'm very intrigued to see what my damage would be with barrage with the double cast. Overall, though, I think the crafting system is a fantastic addition to the game. I'd like to see more depth in other systems, such as the skill system. I think that's still remarkably shallow. I would love to see skills have at least 5, maybe even up to 10 passives, and also to have the means to select multiple passives rather than just a choice between one or the other. I would also like to see them get rid of like the whole linear path thing that they've done. I know why they've done it. It's essentially a tutorial that tells you how to make a viable build. Like, oh, you generally need a basic or resource generator. Here's a mobility or utility skill. You need a defensive skill, blah, blah, blah. But once you get to level 50 and you've played the game, like the campaign, for example, for the first time, at that point, you've learned how to make a build. So I would love to be able to just put points wherever the hell I want. In my barrage build and previous builds, in fact, almost every build that I've made, I end up solving resource management to the point where I don't need any of the skills from that like first hub on any of the classes that I've played. So I end up having to just waste 2 points in order to get to the next hub, when I don't need to. I just want to just put the points where I want. So there are things like that I would love to see for the skill system. Next, there's the pit or rifts. Like, let's be real, they're basically greater rifts from Diablo 3. Now, I've seen a lot of controversy. Maybe that's too strong a word, but I see a lot of people going, oh, it's just greater rifts from Diablo 3. And yeah, it is just greater rifts from Diablo 3, but for every person that I've seen make that remark, I've likewise seen people say, well, I liked greater rifts in Diablo 3. Why weren't they in the game to begin with? And I, as someone who didn't really like them myself, I still agree with the latter, because it would be like Path of Exile not having a mapping system of some sort in Path of Exile 2. We've already heard from GGG that the Atlas in its form in Path of Exile 1 isn't going to exist, but there is going to be a mapping-like system. And the reason for that is because people like the mapping system. So why would we expect any different from the Diablo franchise? If a lot of people liked rifts and greater rifts, it would make sense to have a iterated on version of that in Diablo 4. So I likewise do think it's a good addition. I would say, though, it is kind of the same thing as Nightmare Dungeons to a degree. It's just one of them has a timer and the other one does not. So it is a bit samey, and I think that's a problem that Diablo 4 has in general. And I've made a similar comment in a previous video, where I think one of the issues that they've had is they've made essentially the same type of content up until now, at least, where you are basically starting at a starting point, for lack of a better phrase, blasting through monsters to then be given a reward at the end, and it's all the same. Initially, Helltides were like this, Nightmare Dungeons were like this. Just doing any form of content is always like this. So it would be better to see more just different types of content with different types of rewards. Obviously, they've added the Gauntlet, which is more about the prestige. It's more about speed running and things like that. So it offers a different play style. And I think they need more modes of content that offer different play styles with different goals in mind. So that would be nice to see. But otherwise, I think the pit rifts, as most of us are just going to end up calling them, is absolutely fine. It's pretty good. One thing I do dislike about it, though, is the material acquisition. I ended up with a crossbow on my rogue build with 3 greater affixes, and that meant that every time I did greater rifts and I got materials for my mastercrafts, I dumped it all into this crossbow, and then that crossbow carried me through further tiers. It then meant that when I wanted to upgrade and focus on other gear, I had to do older versions or lower tiers of the rifts. So if you do above tier 20, you start getting to the next version of the materials. The first version is obsoletes or something like that. I don't know. Blizzard have stupid names for their materials in Diablo. I think they should just stick with like metals and stuff like that personally, just keep it simple. But yeah, you would end up going through the higher tiers, acquiring the more higher tiered version of the crafting loot, and then if you wanted to upgrade a new item, you had to go back to farm the weaker loot and therefore do weaker rifts, which just felt a bit crap, because you're like blasting through this remarkably easy content when you could do 3 times the level of content normally. Now, maybe I just imagined it, but I swear they said that there was going to be a way to break down materials, but I couldn't find it. I looked through the various NPCs and I didn't see it. Maybe I missed it, but if I didn't miss it and it's just a case that it's not in, I think that's something they need to introduce, to be able to break down these higher level materials into the lower level ones. And then that way I'm not forced to do the lower level content for the poops and giggles just to bring up my gear to the point where I'm actually supposed to be farming in the first place. And I suppose that's a good segue to the boss ladder. The boss ladder, I think the introduction of Andariel is going to be really, really cool. We need more pinnacle bosses to fight. I didn't get to fight Andariel, unfortunately. There was a bug that prevented the beast in ice from dropping the materials I needed. I managed to find all the other materials for all the other bosses, but for some reason the beast in ice just wouldn't drop the pin cushion, I think it is, or something to that effect. Couldn't get it to drop, did it several times. I looked online and it looks like a lot of other people were having similar issues. One thing I do think is a little silly, to be frank, and that's the progression of the boss ladder. So let's use Andariel, for example. In order to fight Andariel, I need to do the Beast in Ice. The Beast in Ice is a level 85 dungeon. Andariel is level 100 dungeon. If I want to do any level 200 dungeons, I then have to do Nightmare dungeons at tier level 90, which would be the most optimal way of put a little graph on the screen so you can see, which will mean that if I do 90 tier 90 rifts, sorry, tier 90 dungeons, I will get 3 bottles of distilled fear, which means I only have to do 3 of these runs to get the 9 total required to then do the Beast in Ice. So I'm doing a level nearly 150 dungeon to get materials for a level 85 dungeon in order to do the 100 dungeon or the level 200 dungeon. So it just feels bad. Why am I doing a level 85 dungeon when I'm capable of doing content twice that level? So you end up just running through the low level bosses, the low level dungeons, or the instances before these bosses, not killing anything because there's no reason to kill anything, because all the loot that will drop will be sub level 925, eye level 925 that is. So it just feels a little bad. Now I don't know exactly what the solution to this would be. Maybe we just need a level 150 boss, so you can do initially your Vishans, your Grigors, your Zirs, your Beasts in Ice, which are all sub-level 100, in order to acquire materials to do your level 100s. Then maybe Andariel and Duriel should drop materials to then do a level 150 dungeon, and then the level 150 dungeon allows you to do the level 200 dungeons, or level 150 bosses to do the level 200 bosses and things like that. Honestly, that is probably just a band-aid though, and if anything, they should probably actually move away from having to have materials for just about everything in the game. If they move away from having materials in order to do or summon bosses, it would probably just feel a lot smoother. There would be less of this bouncing up and down in terms of levels of difficulty and content that you need to do to reach the peak difficulty. Maybe just a quest system. PoE do a similar thing where you just progress through maps and there's little quests that you have to do along the way, and as you progress through the harder content, you complete the quests. It adds some story narrative to the system as well, and then you can do the uber content in Path of Exile. So maybe something similar to that would be more fitting. It would feel more natural. It would add the means to add some lore into the game. Not everyone cares about lore. I enjoy a good bit of lore every now and then, and it makes sense to have something to do with the story fit in line with these progression systems that you're using. That's just about it. I think the direction Diablo 4 is now going in is certainly the right direction. As I said before, I would like to see more depth in some of the other systems, some slight reworks. The skill system I think should be expanded on. In fact, it's one of the more key things that I think they should be working on next. Maybe the Paragon boards. I would like to see maybe a second glyph slot in some of the Paragon boards, because at the moment when it comes to Paragon, you kind of just rush the slot, maybe get the legendary node if it's convenient, and otherwise you just rush to the next gate in order to unlock the board, to rush to the glyph slot, and so on. Whereas if they had 2 glyph slots, you're more likely to spread your points around, and it's like, well, I'm passing these rare nodes anyway, so I may as well actually get them, rather than just farming for 6 boards to put in your build, if that makes sense. That's going to be it from me. Hopefully that added some information to your Diablo 4 repertoire, and you want to see more videos like this in the future. If you do, subscribe, like the video, treat yourself to an ice cream. Otherwise, have a good day. Farewell. I'll remember you.